to the next speaker. So actually, it's quite easy. In the morning, I was looking around for the speakers. I went and asked one lady, "Are you Holly from Australia?" She said, "Yes, and we are taking over." So may I invite Holly to take over? She's going to talk about national broadband networks, and she's an executive director of the ISOC Australia.
I think I'm in the worst speaking spot between Skeeve and tea, so you can leave now if you want to drink, and he's going to answer all my technical questions, I'll tell you that right now. First of all, I'd like to thank ISOC for funding the project that we undertook. We are, and the National Broadband Network is what NBN says, so if I keep talking about the NBN, it's our National Broadband Network. It has been sort of as part of a public policy having broadband in Australia for some time. We sort of haven't got there, not yet, so we might, but it's going to take us time and we're going to make a lot of mistakes on the way. Part of what we're talking about is at least listening to other people, how they have implemented broadband plans, and perhaps maybe you can learn from us, maybe we can learn from you. This project is about that, and it was funded by the Internet Society, so we're very grateful to them for the funding of this project. Now, where's down? This is the sort of outline of my presentation. The full presentation in the paper is on our website, actually. That's our website. First of all, what is the National Broadband Network? What's our policy? I'm not going to go into the technical issues. There's plenty of documentation about it, just a kind of an outline as to what those issues are. Because we represent internet users, looking at some of the issues from the user perspective, particularly what our own ISOC AU policies are, and then if we can look into the future, what that might bring. The first thing to be said about the NBN policy in Australia is that it is highly politicised. We had an election in 2009, not 10, and we now have a minority government. We have two independents who sided with the current government on the basis of a broadband policy. And we have an opposition that is like one seat away from power. So what they're saying very often is, well, we think this is a waste of money and maybe you should do it differently. So instead of having a very sensible political debate about how to implement a broadband strategy, we actually have a lot of, I suppose, sound cacophony even, and not the proper consideration that we should have in Australia about the best way forward. In fact, there was a recent seminar that I attended where the first presentation was by a gentleman who had come from the UK, had studied the impact of the UK's broadband policy and was presenting at this forum. He had his speech all prepared, he put his speech down and looked up, he said, "I don't believe how political broadband is in Australia." It wasn't until I arrived at Australia that I realised that fibre is left-wing and wireless is right-wing. And that kind of reflects the way the debate has gone. What is it and why do we need it? Now, when I first arrived in this country and sort of looked at the Sunday paper and I thought, there's this article on the digital divide. I thought, my goodness, I'm in Australia. Because we have a digital divide, and in fact, most countries have a digital divide. To bridge that gap, basically, we need an NBN. In Australia, and these are just some of the information about broadband penetration in Australia, a lot of political debate is where we stand in the OECD ratings, and there's a lot of political point scoring on, well, where are we and why aren't we higher? Somewhere around number 10 is where we are in the world, is where we are for wireless broadband. We're lower in terms of household penetration for actual broadband penetration. We're also very expensive, and the reason is a lot of our traffic goes all the way to the States and then comes all the way back, and we wind up as consumers paying for that. The next lot of statistics are from the regulator, the Australian Communications and Media Authority. Basically there, and remember we have a population, if we're lucky, of over 20,000 in a much bigger space than this country. 9.6 million are internet subscribers, some form of DSL. The numbers for mobile wireless are growing all the time. In terms of our own Australian Bureau of Statistics, of the internet subscribers, there are 7% on dial-up. DSL's next, and in fact, it's the most popular. There's a bit of HFC, hybrid fibre cable, which is a pay TV delivery system, which is not used very much, and increasingly we're going to mobile wireless. And the final one, when our incumbent PTT, Telstra, was privatised, there was a lot of lobbying from the rural communities saying, we're afraid of this privatisation because it means Telstra will no longer provide us with the services that we like, the updated services. So there was a legislative requirement that RTIRC, and it's the Rural Telecommunications Infrastructure Review Committee, they must report every 4 years on the quality of service in regional and rural Australia. The last report, which is 2008, basically said in rural and remote Australia, there's under a third of the households actually have access to broadband, and it's pretty terrible dial-up, frankly. So for us, an NBN that goes to everybody is absolutely critical. Wait a minute. The benefits. And picking up on that rural and regional report, the guy who actually had talked about the benefits of broadband in the UK pointed out one of the critical benefits for Australia as well, and that is with broadband, people stay in rural and regional Australia. They get the medical services they would like, they get the education for the kids they would like, they can do their internet banking, they can shop. And in fact, one of our directors has got a wonderful project for his rural area, where he set up a system whereby farmers who need to put fertilizer on their plants at a certain temperature with a certain wind velocity, he's worked out a system whereby when those conditions are right, he notifies the whole area, 3 in the morning, up they get on their tractors, they do the right thing. It is critical for a lot of Australia to have broadband. Now, I don't think I'm telling anybody here about the benefits of broadband that you don't already know, except that for a country like Australia with vast areas, with a lot of agriculture, with a lot of mining, with a need for education, it's actually critical for us. The bottom point is NBN Co, which is the National Broadband Network company, on its website has a lot of videos showing the way in which NBN is actually being used. So, enough said for that. You should know now. It's going to benefit your economy and ours. The actual policy was announced in April 2009, and by the way, the paper that has a lot more information than I'm providing today is on our website and on ISOC's website. The policy is for 93% of the population to get fibre to the premises. And the premises doesn't mean the basement of the building and then something else goes up to the 26th floor. It means premises to the 26th floor. However, given the population density or lack of it, there will be 7% of the population that will be served either by wireless, fixed wireless, or satellite. The aim is everybody gets at least 12 megabits a second download, 1 megabit per second upload, wherever you live. It should also be pointed out, though, that part of the policy, the overall policy framework for introducing the NBN, was to introduce it in a context of a very different competitive environment. We introduced competition in a gradual way starting in 1989, changes in 91, full competition in 97. But I think, as some of you would be aware, maybe many of you, if you have an incumbent and the incumbent wishes to behave anti-competitively, it's a very difficult thing to actually change the parameters of that behaviour. So part of the policy that has been very significant has been the NBN Co will be delivered in a very different environment. And in fact, NBN Co is really only about the local access network. It's not about the rest of the infrastructure. What will be built will be something by a government-owned NBN. It may be privatised later, and that's in legislation, but right now, and until the whole network is up and running and has been for at least 5 years, it cannot be privatised. The national broadband network must be, and this is again in legislation, a uniform national wholesale access price. That's to ensure that basically people throughout Australia have the possibility of an affordable broadband product for a basic service. Now, that's not saying that there won't be variation in price once you get above the basic service, and that's probably, it will be dependent on where you live and what ISPs are out there. And clearly for the fixed wireless and satellite, you cannot offer the same price once you get above a basic service. The competitive environment is NBN Co will be the monopoly provider of the local access network. It's not the whole network, it's just the local access network. By law, it has to be wholesale only, it has to be open access. So in fact, we've just basically said to our incumbent, you're no longer going to own the local access network, a government company is, and it's going to be open to everybody. But it's a monopoly. This is just to show you that 93% of the population